I think the HR operating model and the HR roles of the future will look very different than what it is today because the nature of the work is going to be very different. I think we will start getting new roles in HR that starts to emerge, like HR product managers. How do we start managing HR as a product solution into organizations and optimizing that over time? AI will become much more of a companion in the workforce, and we need to rethink what work design is going to look like. What do you want to achieve through the utilization of AI? Because I think just utilizing AI for AI's sake is also not a good idea. Do we actually have access to the skills within HR to be able to make it work, as well as are we unlocking the skills potential in the rest of the organization? For HR is definitely one of the more complicated functions in terms of having to manage the needs of employees, of leaders, of shareholders. Very often the biggest challenge we find there is the translation of HR priorities aligned towards the business requirement.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another talk of the Nestor Leadership Podcast. My name is Raluca. I am pleased to host a new episode today, and today we will have a very interesting topic, and we will dive together into it with our special guest, and I'm very grateful to have you on the show. It's about Dieter Veldsman. He's the Chief Scientist at AIHR, and we will talk about HR skills in the age of AI. So, Dieter, welcome to the show, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much, Raluca. It's lovely to be here with you today and with the listeners, and definitely looking forward to the conversation.
Same here, and I can't wait to dive more into our conversation today, especially that we are talking about this huge word that actually impacts our lives, our work, and at the same time, the way we do things. Of course, AI, and in combination with skills, it becomes even interesting. So before just diving into that, I was looking at the very first beginning to learn more about you, Dieter, because I am amazed by your experience, more than 15 years in the HR field. You are actually an established figure out there in organizational psychology, so I'm really grateful to have you on the show today. And at the same time, I'm really amazed, and congratulations for the 2 awards that you have won in the past years. So it's about Chief HR Officer of the Year and Practitioner of the Year award. Dieter, I'm really keen to learn more about your story, your background, what brought you here. So give us this opportunity.
No, thank you very much for the kind words, Raluca. And maybe a little bit about me. I've always been driven by an interest in human behavior and how human beings operate within a broader organization. That drew me to organizational psychology initially, and then from there, I entered the profession in various capacities. First in big corporate, was in consulting later on. That also then shifted into my own business around employee engagement and driving HR platform solutions, before returning to the big corporate environment, where eventually I became the group HR officer for a multinational insurance business. Where I find myself at the moment is really at the Academy to Innovate HR, where I play the role of chief scientist. And that means 3 things. The first one is that I have the opportunity to do a lot of applied research with our clients across 100 countries around what are their biggest HR challenges and how do we prepare them for work. It also means that we can take those insights back into our own organization around how do we build the skill set of the HR professional of the future, and then also the opportunity to engage with the industry to say, where should we be taking HR as a profession and what opportunities lie on the horizon. So a little bit about me. I've also had a bit of an academic career as well. So I've always been interested in how do we develop people and really around writing. So have contributed to a number of books as well as chapters and articles.
And we would love to learn more about your books as well. Please let us know afterwards, because we want to also share that with the audience. So we would be really keen to share that with the audience after the show. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And let's see how AI brings into the future of AI, of HR. And at the same time, we are playing in a fast-changing market. The businesses are changing. We are changing. the expectations are changing, not only from a business perspective, but also people want different things. So not sure if that is any influence with the pandemic when HR became more strategic or they had a real word to say in the board. What about now? I was wondering, maybe you can share with us what is the first step HR leaders should take to increase their influence within their organizations so that their voice is really heard from a strategic point of view. So is HR becoming a strategic function? What they would need to do in order to achieve this?
Well, Raluca, I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head. There's been some significant shifts in HR over the past couple of years. Things like the pandemic has been quite a significant impact on the positioning of HR within the organizations, but it actually started before that. The shift and the movement towards HR as a strategic function started in the late 1990s. And really, when the question was asked, how can HR contribute to create value for all the different stakeholders that the organization serves? Your question around where should HR start, I think for me, one of the most important things that HR leaders need to do is to go and invest to build trust capital. And when I talk about trust capital, it's based on three very practical things. The first one is, do you have the competence to be able to engage with your business stakeholders? Because that builds trust. Can they trust you with the types of advice that you give and how you bring HR to the table to link to business challenges? The second component is, do they trust the intent of why you are there? Unfortunately, HR has a bit of a bad reputation over the years in a lot of instances, and we do need to do that work around repositioning the function and what it stands for. And lastly, are you there around a common purpose? Because HR is core to the business, but for strategic leaders really to be able to play that role, they have to form part in a different capacity of the C-suite going forward as well. So to make that practical for me, it's asking the question as an HR practitioner, who are my key stakeholders? What keeps them awake at night? And what is HR's contribution going to be to move the business forward? And those are three critical questions that doesn't matter at what level of HR you operate, you should always be able to answer at the drop of a hat. And I think that makes us a lot more strategic and aligned towards where the business needs to go and gives us a relevance to really be able to operate in the strategic environment. Because the biggest challenges we face are people challenges today. And regardless of who you follow around the world, those are the things that we do need to help our organizations navigate.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very important to learn more about our stakeholders. And actually, HR has, the business as their first and key audience and stakeholder out there, and they need to talk on their language, but at the same time to be very close to the business. So I think HR has a very challenging thing to do, to connect business with people. And balancing this is, in my opinion, is pretty hard. And this is a very hard task to do. Maybe you can tell us more about your research, because, according to your research, more than half of HR departments out there are not really coupled or aligned with business, with the business objectives or what the business wants and tries to achieve. So, not sure if technology could be one of those means that HR could use or leverage in any way, so that it takes more what they want to do with the people, also to be more aligned to the business goals. What's your take on this?
I think first, to respond to your comment around the stakeholder landscape for HR, is definitely one of the more complicated functions in terms of having to manage the needs of employees, of leaders, of shareholders, as well as then also societal expectations to keep the organizations accountable for the way that they operate. So any HR professional needs to be able to seamlessly navigate the requirements and the needs of these different stakeholders. To give some context to the research, the question that we asked there was, what is the strategic impact and value and relevance that HR holds within a lot of organizations? And unfortunately, there is a lot of work still to be done there in that space. Very often, the biggest challenge we find there is the translation of HR priorities aligned towards the business requirements. So what that means is being able to say, if this is what the business is trying to do, how can HR contribute in a transparent manner and get people to understand and be on the same page with regards to that? To speak to technology, I think technology is going to play a critical role. However, technology on its own is not going to solve the problem. there's a couple of things that we definitely need to think about if HR is really going to become and remain a strategic partner at the executive level. And the first one is the question on strategy. So are we aligned with where the business is going, and do we know what we contribute as a function? Second one is structure. Are we set up in the right way as an HR organization to be able to support the business and the chosen business model in the way that it operates? The third one, which we'll dive into a bit later, is the skill set. Do we actually have access to the skills within HR to be able to make it work, as well as are we unlocking the skills potential in the rest of the organization? Systems of work, that relates towards, do we have the processes, the technology, the data, and the governance in place in order to be able to shift and move the function forward? We've spoken about stakeholders as another critical aspect, and pulling that all together is an HR leadership team that can inspire and motivate and really create the runway for the HR function to have a strategic impact. So to answer the question, I think technology is really important, but not in isolation. It's not going to be a silver bullet. However, I think it is going to achieve a couple of things around the accessibility and the reach that HR has, because unfortunately for a lot of people, they still hold the perception of HR that it's a hire, fire, I'm in trouble function, due to the fact that they don't engage with HR in any other types of capacity. And I think that's where the real opportunity lies, for us to do things differently.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely agree with you. Even though we have the right technology or the most innovative technology at hand, if we don't know how to actually purpose that so that it solves the real business needs, unfortunately, it doesn't work. We need to make this balance between the processes out there and what we want to achieve with that. And of course, unlocking the means towards this. So I was wondering, from an HR perspective, from your perspective, do they use this? Do they want to use this? How the role is transforming? Do we need to gain or acquire new skills or upskill on the current ones so that we are able to do this? How do you perceive this transformation so that we or the HR departments out there should consider going forward?
So I definitely think generative AI has been a bit of a game changer within the HR space. I do think that we are only at the beginning of unlocking its potential. And yes, there is still a lot of things that we do need to solve for. However, we have seen major adoption of new AI-based technologies within HR, not only generative AI, even going further back when we start thinking about things like applicant tracking systems and the application and things like learning and development, etc. I think there's three things that we do need to realize and understand around what is changing and what the impact of AI is going to be on HR. And the first one is that who the workforce is actually starting to change. And I think that AI will become much more of a companion in the workforce, and we need to rethink what work design is going to look like. And HR has to play a role there, firstly, to manage the fear that a lot of the workforce holds, as well as to guide the organization around ethical adoption and responsible adoption of AI. I think the second one is the actual work of HR itself is also going to change. We've always been talking about how can we get better at not only through automation, but through the use of technologies to really make HR accessible, to scale the impact that we have, and really drive the promise that we make to business around leveraging the human capital potential in the organization. Now, in my personal view, I don't think we've ever had the technologies that has been able to do that. I think that has changed now because we're no longer only talking about efficiency through automation, talking about intelligent technologies within AI that can actually act as a companion to the HR professional. But that also brings fear, which is my third point, around skill set. The skill set will have to change because it's not going to be, and I get this question a lot, right? And I'm sure you do as well. Is AI going to take my job? As an HR professional, it's definitely going to change your job, and it's going to take some of the activities within your job as well, but it will also unlock some new opportunities that we do need to explore. However, that's a new skill set. It is around how do we augment through AI, the work of HR and the skill set to utilize and leverage these technologies to its full potential. So I think those are some of the shifts that we're starting to see, but it definitely talks about a change in skill set.
And when we are saying this change in skill set, maybe you can help us with some of the examples out there of the skills that we want to or we must look into going forward, because of course, AI would, first of all, put a pressure on us, and is, as you mentioned, it raises the questions, will I have a job in the near future? So basically, we need to also embrace technology by using, as you mentioned, our companion, not like seeing like something out there that will take the job and will make us feel useless, but even more, be more creative, be more involved into the decision-making process. So not sure. What do you say about the skill sets that we need to gain as HR professionals going forward in this world of using high tech and yeah, so many intelligent algorithms are there.
I agree. I think when we talk about a T-shaped HR professional for the future, and it's based on 5 core competencies that all HR professionals need to have. And obviously, depending on your role and context, you need to have them in different amounts and they take on different priority. But the first one is really, and I know we've been talking about business acumen forever, but what business acumen means for us now is that connection of what's happening in the market to how it influences your organization and how HR then plays a role within the organization of crafting what the path going forward is going to look like. The second component is really around data literacy. It doesn't mean that all HR professionals need to be data scientists, but if we really want to drive evidence-based HR, there has to be an understanding of how can we leverage data to inform HR solutions and HR products and tell stories with data to drive the right business decisions going forward. Particularly relevant to AI is what we call digital agility. And digital agility is way less about the tool set, and it's a lot more about the mindset within which you leverage technology. Do we experiment with technology? How open are we towards adopting new technologies in the way that we work? The fourth one, what we've always been good at as HR is people advocacy. So how can we create cultures of well-being that can thrive in the future and that also leads towards productive, sustainable organizations? And the last one is execution excellence, which to us is how does the HR professional show up within the organization? And I really think the tenacity of the HR professional to guide organizations in this time of disruption and in this time of change through skill sets like how resilient are you and how do you build resilience in the organization? How are you making sure that you've got the confidence to apply your skill sets, building the networks and the relationships that you require in order to be successful as an HR practitioner? And how do you think analytically, think strategically, and become a master problem solver that can bring new solutions to the table as organizations start to change? So those 5 things I think is really important, but it starts with the HR professional also understanding how do I gear myself for what is coming in this particular environment? And these are some of the skill sets that we find is going to be very applicable in future.
Mm-hmm. And where HR should start, or how they could start at least to think of integrating AI technology into their operations. Maybe if you're looking at different HR processes like there may be performance management, maybe skills management, maybe how we apply this to learning, where they should start from. Let's say I'm an HR at a large organization, and this is just an example. And yeah, I want to do something that is also effective. So where should I start from?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you can do. The first one is to ask the question around what do you want to achieve through the utilization of AI? Because I think just utilizing AI for AI's sake is also not a good idea. So be very clear just on the purpose of where we are going to apply AI and what the benefits are that we are trying to leverage. I think the second one is to be very transparent and open about what potential risks the utilization of AI does pose. And that leads towards the fact that you need different parties around the table that you can sit with that brings different knowledge of things like data privacy, technology, governance, risk, etc., that helps you make informed decisions around how you are going to adopt and roll out AI. I think there has to be a very strong change process, especially around transparency pertaining to the utilization of AI, and then start small with small little pilots, see how it behaves, and then scale that over time once you've gained some particular confidence. Something I would also encourage is go and see what other people have done, because there's been some great work done in the industry already and what you can learn from that. You know, we see high adoption of generative AI in employee records management. We see high adoption in learning and development, high adoption, especially in recruitment and in hiring. I think some fantastic things being done in that particular space, as well as then, and I think this one is close to home, in the career management skill space as well, in terms of really driving internal mobility and career management within organizations. So I think there's a lot of really good use cases to go and learn from. You have to be open to experiment, but experiment in a responsible way, bringing your stakeholders and the rest of the organization along, and make sure that you always know how the AI is learning and where it's getting its data from. That's kind of the first fundamental thing to be aware of. And then put controls in place so that you can see how it behaves and how it grows over time. So don't fear it, play with it, but play with it in a very responsible manner, and make sure that you're informed about what others are also doing so you can learn from the broader environment.
Yeah, and definitely agree with that, because we need to make sure how we use technology and how we use it in a proper, responsible, and ethical way, and of course maintaining our data privacy at a high level. So I think this is a huge concern out there when we are talking about how we let the technology to play with our data, or how much we share with others, how much, of course, we always want to learn and take some outputs and inputs from the outside. But what about this ethical and privacy principles, how this should be actually communicated by HR, so that we also leverage the potential of AI in talent management and any other HR operations out there, but at the same time to maintain our privacy, of course, and assure, even though we are talking about like enterprises out there that are so careful about this aspect. How we do this? It's a real challenge, and it's a hot conversation out there. Very much a debate these days.
And I think it's a balance, right, between what is the potential for harm through the utilization of AI when things go wrong. On the other side, also then balancing that with the potential for impact, and seeing what are the acceptable risks that we are able to take, and being transparent about those. And for me, there's a couple of questions as an HR professional you should always be asking around the ethics of any AI technology that you're utilizing. And the first one is it valid and reliable? So is it actually doing what it is supposed to do? And is it doing it consistently over time? And I think that's quite an important thing to monitor, how AI also changes over time, because all good things start with good intent, but it goes wrong further down the line. So having that particular oversight. I've already mentioned the second question around what is the potential for harm around your AI use case. It's very different when AI recommends the wrong learning program to somebody in your organization versus influencing a hiring decision that then results in the fact that somebody does not get a job and influences their livelihood. So what is the potential for harm, and what are the risks and the biases, etc., that we need to take in place applicable to that particular use case? Third one is about security. So how secure is the technologies we are utilizing? How safe is it from things like cyber attacks, etc.? And with that also to sort out some of the legalities pertaining to things like intellectual property. We've seen a couple of really interesting court cases coming about at the moment around the utilization of public, or what people perceive to be public domain information. Transparency, how transparent is it in terms of also the user on the other side? Are they aware that they are dealing with AI? And I think that's really interesting. And there's some interesting experiments coming out of places like Cambridge at the moment around AI-based coaching, and how people prefer to whether deal with a human being or to deal with an AI system. It depends a lot on the positioning and the transparency within which we position the solution to those individuals. And then the last one for me is it fair? Can we actually control for bias as part of this particular process? So, it's a fine balance that we need to walk. But what I do want to say is that there are really good risk frameworks and guidelines out there. And as long as we keep ourselves honest about some of these questions that I've mentioned, I think we can make informed decisions around the responsible utilization of artificial intelligence. We also need to educate our stakeholders about that, to just move some of the misperceptions that's currently in the public domain out of the way. And I blame public media a little bit for this. There's a lot of misconceptions about what Gen AI is, what it is going to do, and what it's not going to do. And a really good question is, what is this not going to achieve, and how is that going to influence the decisions we make about the AI adoption as well? So, Raluca, in short, I think there's massive opportunity, but we have to go into it with our eyes open, and with these questions kind of as a guiding light. I think that's very useful.
Yeah, definitely. And we need to be really responsible out there, from this point of view, and also inform the stakeholders. And as you have said, educate them, because there may be huge opportunities out there, and AI could have great impact in the future of HR, in the future of our organizations. How an organization, or at least an HR, could pitch this to a stakeholder This would be one personal curiosity that I have, and at the same time, how we make sure that we are prepared to adopt this kind of technology, even though it's like the POC level. It's not something that we go organizational wide and we enable this for the entire people.
I think the first piece there is, in the education of stakeholders is to make it relevant to what they are already talking about. I think it's not that you're going to be selling AI into the organization. You need to be selling a solution that is going to provide real business value. So what do I mean by that? It's not really that attractive to a business stakeholder when you come as HR and say, we want to implement an AI system because it's going to improve the efficiency of the back office HR function, and it's really going to manage our workload in a fantastic way. That's not really that attractive for a business stakeholder to engage with that. However, showcasing to say, if we are able to implement AI technologies that do the following, the business impact is going to be, we will be focusing on different types of talent approaches. We will be able to source better quality candidates, and linking that towards a particular business outcome, I think changes the conversation quite a bit. The second piece for me is to have a responsible roadmap so people can see how this is going to happen. Because I think the misconception very often is that these things happen over time, and some of the best technologies incrementally have to increase its impact over time. And we are terrible at that as HR. We typically implement something and we stick to the MVP phase forever, and we don't really optimize the utilization of tech. So have a very clear roadmap that helps you manage the expectations of the business stakeholder. And the third point there is celebrate small successes and wins, because I think that's where the battle's going to be won. It's not about the big things that we achieve over time. It's about the small little battles and going back to the business and say, through the adoption of this is actually what's improved this quarter. This is what's now different than what it was in the past. Compared to where we were last year, this time, this is where we are today. And that's where data is going to be a really, really important source of driving a different type of argument and a different type of narrative that over time will help people engage with the solution even more. So I think from an HR point of view, think about this as you are the public relations officer for the utilization of AI in your own organization. How are you going to change the perceptions, bring people along, make sure that they want this in the longer term, and show them the benefit? Those are the things that we need to get right as HR if we're really going to optimize and grasp the opportunities that this offers.
And definitely taking this iteration by iteration, learning by learning, and this is how you increase the adoption, and of course how you gain people to support you going forward. But we are talking a lot about AI, the technology out there, the HR function, new skill sets that we might look into. Are there any, I don't know, future roles that also the HR function will take going forward? Would those roles be kind of emerging in the near future? What do you see this going forward?
No, definitely. I think the HR operating model and the HR roles of the future will look very different than what it is today, because the nature of the work is going to be very different. We're already starting to see, if I go a couple of years back, when you spoke about employee experience, it wasn't something that people actually grasped was happening in the HR function. Whereas today you've got, heads of employee experience, you've got people specifically looking at how do we optimize those types of functions. Going forward, and as a result of AI as well as other changes, it's not only going to be driven by AI. I think we will start getting new roles in HR that starts to emerge. And, this is now me gazing into a crystal ball, but I think things that might be relevant is, like HR product managers. How do we start managing HR as a product solution into organizations and optimizing that over time? I think we'll have HR architects that talks about what HR will look like and how it integrates with business in a very, very different way. I think BPs will change to have much more of an account management, customer success type of mentality around connecting their business to the different HR products that is offered across the organization at the right time. And really a new breed of HR technology roles that will also come to the fore. Maybe an important point is, I think for HR really to grasp the opportunity, we also have to grasp and take ownership of how our technology architecture and roadmap is going to unfold. And in a lot of organizations, that doesn't actually sit with HR. And I think that's something that has to change. And we need new roles that has new skill sets to bring that into the room. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how we transition people into those opportunities.
And I can't wait to see that in the future, because it looks so interesting. So we are starting to blend different ways of and operation models and different let's say responsibilities from other departments into the HR function. And I feel that this is so exciting going forward. But at the same time, yeah, we need to be prepared and take this step by step. I don't know when the time passed and we are approaching the end of our talk. I would love, because it's so much about HR impact, HR becoming strategic, HR being more handling different means of bringing or helping organizations to achieve business goals. What would be, in your opinion, so to end this show with this one, a few KPIs that we as HR professionals need to think of so that we can prove, or at least to think of business impact, and of course incorporate that into our future projects?
So I think my answer comes with a little bit of a caveat around saying that I think KPIs should be crafted in the context of the business. So it will be very different for businesses depending on, what the biggest challenges are. So if it's growth, that will lead towards a certain set of KPIs for HR. If it's cost cutting, it will be something different. If it's efficiency, etc. Having said that, though, I think there's three really important metrics that any HR professional needs to be very, very aware of if they're going to play that strategic role. First one for me is, what is the caliber of a leadership that you are building? So are you actually confident that the leadership pool that you've got in place in a values-driven way is going to achieve the organizational objectives and strategies? The second one, what is the health of the talent pipeline? Because that talks towards the sustainability of the business going forward. So how confident are you that you've got access to the right skills today and tomorrow, aligned to the workforce plan in the organization? And then lastly, really a metric around the culture in the organization. So what does engagement look like? What does employee experience look like? And what does well-being look like in the organization? The climate piece there that we need to be very, very aware of is, does the organization have the energy to move and perform and to execute? So, there's various other operational and return on investment type of metrics, which I think is also important. But for me, I always ask myself these three questions. Do we have the leaders today? Do we have the talent for tomorrow? And do people actually have the energy that they want to work here and they want to execute and they feel part of what we are trying to drive within the future? And for me, those are the important ones to keep in mind.
And I think these are the questions that should define our framework when we start a new project. And thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Dieter. It was a real pleasure. And I personally learned so much from this talk. And I'm really sure that audience will also see the same value as well. So thank you again for joining us today. It was a real pleasure having you. And we are really keen to talk and talk about different other hot topics out there. And yeah, hopefully we'll redo this again very soon. Thank you for joining us today, and yeah, can't wait to meet you again in a new episode in the future.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me and for a very engaging conversation. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Dieter.
Thanks so much, Raluca. Keep well.